Have you ever wondered how, like a rural janitor who spends his entire life just sweeping floors and pumping gas, how that guy dies with $8 million in the bank?
It sounds like a movie plot, honestly.
Right. But then you have a Harvard-educated Wall Street executive operating in the exact same economy, and he goes completely bankrupt.
It's a staggering contrast.
It really is.
Oh.
And it's the exact question we are going to unravel today. Welcome to the deep dive.
There is a scenario that plays out in millions of households every single month. And chances are you've experienced it yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
You're working incredibly hard. You're putting in your 40 hours, maybe, picking up an extra shift, sacrificing your weekends just to get ahead. And the paycheck finally hits the bank account.
You get that brief sigh of relief.
Yeah, that momentary sense of relief. You pay the rent, you cover the utilities, you buy groceries, you put gas in the car so you can commute right back to work on Monday. And then the dust settles.
And you look at the balance. Exactly. You look at the balance at the end of the month, and you just sit there wondering, where did it all actually go?
It is a profoundly exhausting cycle. I mean, the cognitive load of constantly monitoring every penny while feeling like you're running on a treadmill that just keeps increasing in speed.
It leaves very little energy for long-term planning.
Right, exactly. And the broader culture doesn't help at all.
No, it really doesn't. You scroll through your phone or you turn on the television and you see pop culture, society, and these slick financial gurus in tailored suits
Yeah.
making wealth seem like an exclusive velvet rope club.
With a bouncer at the door?
Yeah. They use this incredibly dense vocabulary like derivatives, expense ratios, arbitrage, yield curves.
It creates the illusion that there is a secret language to money.
And it makes you feel like, because you didn't major in finance, you somehow missed the boat. You are locked out of the system forever.
Well, and that jargon serves a very specific purpose for the financial industry.
Oh, totally.
It builds a moat around the concept of wealth. I mean, if they can convince you that managing money is as complicated as quantum physics, then you will feel entirely dependent on them.
And their high fees.
Exactly, to survive. But the reality is that the core principles of building financial independence are shockingly straightforward.
They really are.
And they are completely accessible to anyone, regardless of your income level or your background.
Which brings us to our mission for today. We are entirely focused on cutting through that manufactured noise. We have gathered a massive stack of incredibly insightful sources for this deep dive.
Some really great material.
Yeah, we are looking at deep behavioral economics from works like Misbehaving and the Psychology of Money, and we're pairing that with highly practical roll-up-your-sleeves playbooks like I Will Teach You to Be Rich, The Total Money Makeover, and Your Money or Your Life.
It's the perfect blend of theory and practice.
Right. We are going to distill all of this complex research into a jargon-free, actionable roadmap specifically for everyday, hardworking people.
We are going to explore the mechanics of how money actually operates in our daily lives. No impossible promises, no get-rich-quick schemes, and absolutely no fluff.
Just a systematic approach to reclaiming your time and your autonomy. So we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do.
We are going to explore the core concepts of money psychology, bust some of the most destructive financial myths that have been sold to us, look at the common mistakes that literally everyone makes, and then connect the dots between debt, savings, insurance, investing, and retirement.
It's a full ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can even talk about where to put your money or how to invest, we have to establish the absolute baseline reality of personal finance.
Right.
And the truth is, personal finance is not actually a math problem. It is a behavioral problem.
That is the pivotal shift in perspective. It makes everything else we are going to discuss possible. I mean, our entire educational system teaches us to view money through the lens of a spreadsheet.
Yeah, like it's just numbers.
We are conditioned to believe that if we were just a little bit smarter, or if we had a better grasp of calculus, or if we could build a more complex Excel model, we would be wealthy.
But the research doesn't back that up.
Not at all. The overwhelming consensus across all our sources is that financial success is roughly 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge. It is about psychology, not arithmetic.
Which brings us right back to the story I mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah.
We have to talk about Ronald Read and Richard Fuscone.
Oh, yes.
Because there is really no better real-world illustration of behavior over math.
It is a remarkable historical parallel. So, Ronald Read was a man who lived in a small town in Vermont. For a living, he fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years.
Just an everyday guy.
Exactly. And then he swept floors as a janitor at a JCPenney for another 17 years. He was actually the first person in his entire family to graduate from high school. Yeah. He drove a modest second-hand Toyota. He lived in a two-bedroom house that he purchased for $12,000 at age 38. And his primary hobby was chopping firewood.
Chopping firewood. I love that.
He lived a quiet, unassuming life that completely blended into the background.
But then he passes away in 2014 at the age of 92, and he suddenly makes international headlines.
Right.
Because this unassuming janitor left behind an estate valued at over $8 million.
$8 million.
He left $2 million to his stepchildren and donated over $6 million to his local hospital and library. $8 million from sweeping floors and pumping gas.
And we have to be clear about how he did it, you know? There was no lottery ticket. There was no secret inheritance from a wealthy uncle.
No crypto boom.
Right, none of that. He simply lived below his means, saved what little surplus he could, invested it consistently in high-quality, dividend-paying companies, and then, crucially, he waited. He let compounding interest do its work over decades. He controlled his behavior.
And to really understand why that is so profound, we have to look at the man who was making headlines in the exact same year, Richard Fuscone.
Fuscone is the ultimate foil here.
Because Fuscone had every single advantage that Read did not. I mean, he was a Harvard-educated finance executive.
He held an MBA from an elite institution.
He rose through the ranks to become the vice chairman of Merrill Lynch's Latin America division. He was so incredibly successful in the world of high finance that he retired in his 40s to pursue personal philanthropy.
The business magazines just loved him.
He was the guy who understood the math better than anyone else in the room.
He had the highest level of technical financial knowledge a human being can possibly possess, but his behavior was completely untethered.
Yeah, he lacked emotional control.
In the mid-2000s, driven by ego and, a desire for status, he borrowed heavily to expand his already massive 18,000 square foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut.
18,000 square feet.
We are talking about a house with 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, and a monthly maintenance bill of $90,000.
$90,000 a month just to keep the lights on. That's insane.
To finance this lifestyle, he took on immense amounts of debt, assuming his high income would never end.
And then the 2008 financial crisis hits.
Yeah.
The liquidity just dries up.
Exactly. The economy contracts, his illiquid assets plummet in value, and the debt crushes him. Just months before Ronald Read's multi-million-dollar estate was revealed, Richard Fuscone stood in front of a bankruptcy judge and declared that he had zero income and insurmountable debt.
His sprawling mansion was sold in a foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. He lost absolutely everything.
It just shatters the illusion that wealth is about intelligence.
It really does. I mean, you literally cannot find a janitor who can perform open-heart surgery better than a Harvard-trained surgeon, or a janitor who can design a skyscraper better than a trained architect.
It's impossible.
But in the world of personal finance, a janitor with patience and impulse control can completely obliterate a Harvard-trained executive who lacks those behavioral traits.
What's fascinating here is that it reveals the limits of formal education when it comes to money. I mean, your brain's prefrontal cortex might know exactly how compound interest works, but if your amygdala is driving you to buy a luxury car just to impress your neighbors, the math knowledge is entirely useless.
This highlights something I found really compelling in the research. If our financial outcomes are dictated by our behavior, then we have to trace that behavior back to its roots.
Where does it come from?
Right. Our sources talk a lot about these invisible scripts or factory settings. Essentially, none of us are born with a blank slate when it comes to money.
No, not at all.
The way we view spending, saving, and risk is heavily imprinted upon us by the economic environment of our childhood and the generation we just happen to be born into.
That's exactly right. The macroeconomics of your formative years become the microeconomics of your adult brain. The experiences you have with money in your teens and 20s disproportionately dictate how you will manage risk for the rest of your life.
Let's make that concrete for a second. Imagine you were born in the 1950s, which means you came of age in the late 1960s and 1970s.
Okay.
That was an era of massive runaway inflation. You grew up watching the stock market stagnate for a decade. You watched gas lines stretch around the block.
Right, the oil crisis.
You sat at the kitchen table and heard your parents whispering in a panic because the price of bread and milk had doubled in just a few months. If that is your factory setting, you are going to view investing as a terrifying gamble, and you are going to view cash as something that literally melts in your hands.
Now contrast that with someone who came of age in the 1990s.
Totally different world.
If you graduated high school in 1990, you watched the stock market go on an unprecedented, roaring bull run for an entire decade. Unemployment was low, tech companies were exploding, and everyone seemed to be getting rich just by putting money into index funds.
So that person's invisible script says the stock market is a safe, wealth-generating machine.
Exactly. And if those two people meet at a dinner party and try to discuss investing, they're going to think the other person is completely insane.
The person from the 70s thinks the person from the 90s is reckless. The person from the 90s thinks the person from the 70s is a paranoid hoarder.
But neither of them is crazy. They are just running different software.
And it's not just generational timing. It's the specific phrases we hear growing up.
Oh, absolutely.
If your parents constantly repeated things like, rich people are greedy, or money is the root of all evil, or we just aren't math people,
those become your invisible scripts.
you'll unconsciously sabotage your own financial success as an adult because your internal software tells you that having money makes you a bad person.
Which brings up a crucial point about empathy. Understanding these factory settings allows us to look at the financial behavior of others, and frankly ourselves, with far less judgment.
We're so quick to judge.
When we see someone making what looks like a mathematically terrible financial decision, our first instinct is usually to criticize. We look at the spreadsheet and say, how could they be so stupid?
But we have to realize that every financial decision a person makes complete sense to them in that exact moment, based on the unique factory settings they're operating under.
And that leads perfectly into one of the most baffling statistics we uncovered in the sources.
This one blew my mind.
It gets heavily criticized in mainstream financial media. The statistics show that the lowest income households in the country spend an average of $400 a year on lottery tickets.
Now, mathematically, that is pure madness. We also know that a massive percentage of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. So the narrative is usually, well, if these people just stopped buying scratch-offs, they would have an emergency fund. It's so easy to judge. But why does it actually happen?
If you rely strictly on logic, it is inexplicable. I mean, the odds of winning the Powerball are 1 in 292 million.
You're more likely to get struck by lightning while getting eaten by a shark.
Basically, yeah. But you have to look at the psychology of scarcity. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, working a physically demanding job with stagnant wages, and you have absolutely no margin in your budget.
Just scraping by.
The idea of saving up for a down payment on a house or fully funding a child's college education or retiring to a beach, those things feel mathematically impossible. They are a million miles away.
The gap between their current reality and that dream is just insurmountable through just saving $10 a week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wealthier people take those dreams for granted. They know that if they just invest consistently, they will eventually buy the house and retire. But for someone in deep poverty, buying a $2 lottery ticket is not an investment strategy.
No, it's not.
It is a coping mechanism. For those 3 days between buying the ticket and the drawing, they get to tangibly hold hope in their hands.
Wow, yeah.
They get to dream about walking into their boss's office and quitting. They get to dream about paying off their mother's mortgage. They are purchasing a psychological release valve that they desperately need just to get through the week.
It's not about the math of the ticket at all. It's about buying a temporary escape from a crushing reality.
That's it, exactly.
And speaking of the weird ways our brains process money, I want to pivot to the concept of mental accounting.
Oh, this is a big one.
This completely shifted my perspective on how we compartmentalize our finances. So many of us do this. We will have, say, $5,000 sitting in a savings account, earning maybe 1% interest if we're lucky.
Very lucky.
Right. And at the exact same time, we're carrying $5,000 in credit card debt that is charging us 20% interest.
Right.
The math is screaming at us that we are actively losing money every single day. Why do we refuse to just take the cash and pay off the card?
Mental accounting is a fascinating cognitive bias. It describes our tendency to assign different subjective values to the exact same dollars based on where they are located.
Even though a dollar is just a dollar.
In reality, yes, it is completely fungible.
Yeah.
But in our heads, we put money into distinct emotional buckets. The $5,000 in the savings account gets labeled as sacred.
Sacred, I like that.
It represents safety, security, and all the hard work it took to accumulate it. The credit card debt, however, is viewed as a separate, annoying burden.
So if I take the sacred money and use it to kill the debt, my brain doesn't register that my net worth stayed exactly the same.
No, not at all.
My brain just panics and says, you have $0 in savings. You are completely vulnerable.
Precisely. The psychological pain of seeing that savings account drop to zero is far more acute than the slow, hidden pain of paying 20% interest every month.
Because we don't see the interest, it's just baked into the minimum payment.
We fear that if we drain the savings, we will lack the discipline to ever build it back up again. So we willingly pay the bank a massive premium and interest charges just to maintain the illusion of a safety net.
It's like we have multiple personalities fighting for control over our wallets. The sources actually personify this internal conflict really well. They talk about sabotage, Sam and Fatima.
It's a great analogy.
It's as if we have an angel and a devil on our shoulders. The rational part of our brain, the angel, sets the budget on Sunday night. It says, we are going to cook rice and beans all week, we're not going to buy any clothes, and we're going to send an extra $200 to the credit card.
A perfect, logical plan.
But then Thursday rolls around.
And by Thursday, your willpower is completely depleted.
Exactly. The devil on your shoulder isn't actually evil, it's just your own exhaustion. Your boss yelled at you, your commute was a nightmare, the kids are screaming, and you are just physically and emotionally drained. And that voice kicks in and says, you know what? I worked too hard to be this miserable. I deserve a treat. I'm ordering the $40 takeout.
We willingly sabotage our own long-term financial freedom just to get a tiny hit of short-term dopamine.
Because our present reality is too stressful to bear.
Right.
So how do we break out of that? How do we stop the self-sabotage?
The only way to stop the sabotage is to address the underlying stress. You cannot willpower your way out of financial anxiety.
Because willpower fades by Thursday.
Exactly. When you are operating in a constant state of panic, worrying about whether a flat tire is going to mean you can't pay rent, your brain is stuck in survival mode. The prefrontal cortex, which handles long-term planning, effectively shuts down.
You can't think about retirement if you can't afford Tuesday.
So the very first step in our roadmap isn't about investing in the stock market or negotiating debt. The first step is to build an unbreakable foundation. We have to construct a physical and psychological buffer between you and the chaos of the world.
Okay, so that leads us into the practical mechanics of this foundation. And the absolute bedrock, the very first thing you have to do, according to the sources, is build a starter emergency fund of exactly $1,000.
Yes.
You put it in a savings account, and you do not touch it.
It is entirely non-negotiable. It is the prerequisite for every single strategy we are going to discuss from here on out.
Now, let's be real.
Yeah.
In today's economy, $1,000 is not going to solve every problem.
Far from it.
It's not going to cover a 6-month job loss, and it won't buy you a new car. But that's not its purpose.
Well,
Its purpose is to act as a shock absorber for the everyday, annoying emergencies of working-class life.
the inevitable annoyances.
Right. It's for when you are driving to your shift and you hear that awful grinding noise, and the mechanic says you need new brake pads. It's for when the water heater rusts out and floods the basement on a Tuesday night. It's for the unexpected medical copay when your kid falls off the monkey bars.
And we know these events are going to happen. The data is incredibly clear on this. 78% of households will experience a major negative financial event within any given 10-year window.
Almost 80%.
It is not a matter of if it is going to rain. It is an absolute certainty that it will rain. You need to have an umbrella already packed.
But let me challenge this for a second because I want to make sure the math makes sense to the listener. Let's say I have $5,000 in credit card debt, and the bank is bleeding me for 18% interest every month.
Okay, pretty common scenario.
If I somehow manage to scrape together $1,000, putting it in a savings account where it earns maybe 2% feels completely counterintuitive. I am voluntarily losing 16% on that money. Why wouldn't I take that $1,000 and instantly throw it at the credit card?
It's a very common objection, and mathematically you are absolutely correct. But remember, our foundational rule, this is about behavior, not math.
Right.
Let's play out your scenario. You take your hard-earned $1,000 and you send it to the credit card company. Your balance drops to $4,000. You feel great.
I feel like a genius.
But what happens 3 weeks later when your alternator dies and it costs $600 to fix?
Well, I don't have any cash, so I have to swipe the credit card to pay the mechanic.
Exactly. And the moment you swipe that card, a massive psychological shift occurs. You feel like a total failure.
Yeah, you feel defeated.
You think to yourself, I tried so hard, I made all the right sacrifices, and I'm right back in debt. The system is rigged, this budgeting thing doesn't work for me. And what happens?
You quit.
You quit. You abandon the plan entirely, and you go back to your old spending habits. The purpose of that $1,000 is not to earn a return on investment. The purpose is to protect your psychological momentum. It is Murphy's Law Repellent.
Murphy's Law Repellent, I love that.
When the alternator dies, you pay for it with cash. You get annoyed, sure, but you don't go into debt. You protect your mindset.
That makes perfect sense. It breaks the cycle of constantly running back to the lender. And once we have that initial buffer in place, we really need to completely overhaul how we view the concept of savings in general.
This is a big psychological hurdle.
For a lot of people, especially if things are tight, saving money feels like a punishment. It feels like putting yourself on a restrictive diet. You're constantly telling yourself no and watching other people enjoy their money.
It feels like deprivation.
Right. But Vicki Robin, in her book Your Money or Your Life, introduces a concept that completely flips this narrative. She argues that savings is not deprivation at all. Savings is stored life energy.
It is one of the most profound paradigm shifts in personal finance. I mean, think about what a job actually is. You are taking the most finite, precious resource you have, the hours of your life, and you're trading them to an employer in exchange for currency.
Time you're never getting back.
Never. Every dollar in your bank account represents a specific fraction of your life energy that you can never reclaim.
Right. So when you impulsively spend that money on something you don't even really care about, you are essentially throwing parts of your life into the wind.
Yes.
But when you save it, you are capturing that energy. I like to think of it like a dam on a river. The water flowing down the river has power, but if you don't capture it, it just washes out to sea. When you build a dam, your savings account, the water builds up behind it.
It becomes potential energy.
Exactly. It is potential energy. It is just sitting there, waiting to be unleashed when you truly need it.
And what you ultimately buying with that potential energy is autonomy.
If you have zero savings, your boss owns you. If they demand you work the weekend, you have to do it because you need the paycheck to cover Tuesday's rent. But if you have a massive reservoir of stored life energy, say 6 months of living expenses, you hold the power.
You have choice.
You have the energy to escape a toxic, soul-crushing work environment. You have the energy to survive a sudden corporate downsizing without facing eviction. You have the profound freedom to look at a bad boss and simply say, I'm done, and walk away. Savings isn't about restricting your life today. It is about buying your freedom for tomorrow.
And part of protecting that freedom, ensuring that the dam you've built doesn't suddenly crack, is managing catastrophic risk.
Which means talking good insurance.
Yes. This is where we have to discuss the role of insurance. Because once you start accumulating a little bit of wealth, the financial industry is going to try to sell you a dizzying array of complex insurance products.
It is incredibly confusing. You have agents pitching you policies that are supposed to act as investments or tax shelters or retirement plans. It feels like you need a law degree to read the brochures.
We need to separate myth from fact right now because millions of people are losing money to these products.
So what's the myth?
The overarching myth is that insurance is a good investment vehicle. The fact is that insurance is purely downside protection. Its single defining purpose is to transfer catastrophic financial risk away from your family and onto an insurance company. That's it. You should never mix investing with insurance.
So what does the actual playbook look like for everyday folks who just want to protect themselves without getting ripped off?
It's surprisingly simple. For things like health insurance and auto insurance, you want to carry the highest deductibles you can legally and practically afford.
Wait, highest deductibles, won't that cost me more if I get in a wreck?
Well, yes and no. Why do we want high deductibles? Because higher deductibles dramatically lower your monthly premiums. You use your emergency fund to cover the deductible if you get into a fender bender, and you let the insurance company cover the catastrophic $30,000 hospital bill.
Yeah.
You are self-insuring the small annoyances and transferring the massive risks.
And what about life insurance? Because this is where people really get taken for a ride.
Yes, they do. The rule here is unequivocal. Buy cheap, level, premium term life insurance, usually a 20-year term policy that covers 10 to 12 times your annual income.
So if I make 50 grand, a $500,000 policy.
Exactly. If you pass away unexpectedly, that money replaces your income and ensures your spouse can pay the mortgage and feed the kids. It is incredibly affordable.
And what should we avoid?
What you must avoid at all costs are whole life, universal life, or cash value policies. These are actively pitched by salespeople because they carry massive commissions.
Right, because they make a ton of money off you.
They attempt to bundle a death benefit with a very poor savings account. The premiums are often 10 times higher than term insurance, the fees are astronomical, and the returns on the investment portion are abysmal. Keep your insurance cheap and invest the difference yourself.
Okay, so let's take stock of where we are. We've built the shield. We have our $1,000 Murphy's Law Repellent in the bank. We've shifted our mindset to view savings as stored life energy and ultimate freedom. And we've set up simple, clean insurance to protect us from absolute catastrophe.
The defense is set.
The defense is set. Now, we finally get to go on the offensive. And the very first target we have to attack is the debt that is systematically draining our paychecks.
This requires us to confront a massive cultural narrative that has done catastrophic damage to the middle and working classes over the last 50 years. And that is the pervasive idea that debt is a sophisticated tool for prosperity.
Oh, you hear this everywhere. You need to leverage other people's money. It takes money to make money. It's good debt. The entire culture is built on the premise that borrowing money to fund your lifestyle is just a normal part of being an adult.
It is a toxic, mathematically flawed myth. If you want to build wealth, you have to understand that your income is your most powerful wealth-building tool.
Your income is the engine.
Your paycheck is the engine of your entire financial life. When you tie up your monthly income in $600 car payments, $400 student loan minimums, and $300 credit card payments, you are siphoning the fuel right out of your engine.
You lose all your power.
You are literally taking the life energy you just traded your hours for and handing it over to a bank to inflate their profit margins. As the ancient proverb goes, the borrower is slave to the lender.
And because the pain of those monthly payments becomes so unbearable, we start desperately looking for shortcuts.
And the financial industry is standing right there.
Ready to sell us a solution that is usually just a deeper trap? Let's bust a couple of these specific debt myths. Myth number 1, debt consolidation is a smart way to save yourself.
This is perhaps the most common trap. The fact is, debt consolidation just moves the mess around. It doesn't clean it up. Let's say you have 3 credit cards maxed out at $10,000 each. A consolidation company offers you a single $30,000 personal loan at a slightly lower interest rate to pay them all off. You do it, and the credit card balances hit 0.
And suddenly, you feel this massive false sense of accomplishment. You feel like you did something responsible.
But you haven't actually paid off a single dime of the principal. You just changed the logo on the bill you receive every month.
You treated the symptom, the high interest rate, but you completely ignored the underlying behavioral disease, which is spending more than you make.
Exactly. And mathematically, we know exactly how this plays out. Because the behavior hasn't changed, and because the brain feels a sense of relief seeing those credit card balances at 0, the vast majority of people who consolidate end up slowly running those original credit cards right back up again.
So then they have double the debt.
Within a couple of years, they have the $30,000 consolidation loan, and $30,000 in new credit card debt. They are in twice as much trouble.
The analogy I always use for this is cleaning a bedroom. Debt consolidation is like a teenager who's told to clean a disastrously messy room, and their solution is to just scoop everything off the floor and violently shove it into the closet.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. They close the door, stand back, and look around. The room looks perfectly clean. Their brain actually gives them a hit of dopamine, a reward for a job well done. So what do? Next? They bring in a new box of toys and start making a new mess.
But the closet is still full.
But the original mess is still lurking in that closet, going stale, and the second the door gets bumped, an absolute avalanche of junk is going to fall on their head.
No.
You cannot reorganize your way out of debt.
That is a perfect visualization. And that brings us to myth number 2, which is significantly more dangerous than consolidation.
Yep.
The myth that borrowing against the equity in your home to pay off unsecured debt is a savvy financial move.
Oh, right. You see the commercials all the time. Take out a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, to pay off your high-interest credit cards. The interest rate is so much lower, and it's tax-deductible.
The fact is, this introduces catastrophic, life-altering risk into your financial ecosystem. You have to understand the difference between unsecured and secured debt.
Can you break that down?
Sure. Credit card debt is unsecured. It is backed by nothing but your promise to pay. If you lose your job and completely default on your credit cards, the bank can call you, they can harass you, they can ruin your credit score, but they cannot easily come and take the roof over your head.
But the moment you take out a home equity loan to pay off those cards, you have transformed unsecured debt into secured debt.
Mhm.
You have legally attached that credit card debt to the physical structure of your house.
Exactly. And the brutal reality is that 100% of foreclosures happen to people with mortgages and home equity loans.
That's terrifying.
If you experience a layoff or a medical emergency and you default on that HELOC, you don't just get annoying phone calls. The bank forecloses on your property, and your family is homeless. You should never, under any circumstances, wager your family's shelter to pay off a MasterCard bill.
So if shortcuts like consolidation and HELOCs are off the table, how do we actually get the mess out of the room? How do we destroy the debt? The sources provide some very practical, highly tactical steps. Action step 1, you have to make a master spreadsheet. You cannot fight an invisible enemy.
This is often the most emotionally painful step of the entire process, which is why people avoid it.
It is terrifying. You have to sit down at the kitchen table, open every single statement and write it all down, the name of the lender, the total balance owed, the minimum monthly payment, and the exact interest rate.
And seeing that final number is hard.
When you see the final tally at the bottom of the page, it might make you physically nauseous. But ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is expensive. Once you can clearly see the enemy, you can begin to systematically attack it.
And before you just start throwing money at it, there is a brilliant, actionable step drawn from Ramit Sevi's material that can immediately reduce the friction. You need to negotiate your APR.
Yes, this is one of the greatest aha moments in practical finance. People assume that the interest rate on their credit card statement is a law of physics, like gravity. It isn't. It's just a number a bank algorithm spat out. You can literally just call the 1-800 number on the back of your card and ask them to lower it.
Now, you might wonder why a credit card company would ever willingly agree to make less money off of you.
Right. Why would they do that?
It comes down to customer acquisition costs. It costs a bank a tremendous amount of money in marketing and sign-up bonuses to acquire a new customer. Retaining an existing customer who pays their bills is much cheaper.
So they have an incentive to keep you happy.
Exactly. If they think you are going to transfer your balance to a competitor, they are often perfectly willing to drop your rate by a few percentage points just to keep you on the hook.
And the script to this is so simple. You just say, hi, I've been a reliable customer with you for 3 years, but I'm currently paying an 18% interest rate. I've been receiving offers in the mail from other companies for much lower rates, but I'd like to stay with you. What can you do to lower my APR today?
It's direct but polite.
If the first representative says no, politely hang up and call back to get a different rep. It takes maybe 10 minutes of your time. If it fails, you are in the exact same position you were yesterday. But if it works, you instantly save hundreds or even thousands of dollars in interest over the life of the debt, meaning significantly more of your monthly payment goes toward actually killing the principal.
It is a high-leverage 5 minutes. Once the rates are as low as you can get them, the final step is execution. You have to pay it off aggressively.
And there are 2 primary approaches for that, right?
Right. Yes. There are 2 primary mathematical approaches here. The debt avalanche, where you attack the debt with the highest interest rate first, which mathematically saves you the most money, and the debt snowball, where you attack the debt with the smallest total balance first, regardless of the interest rate.
And given that we established this is all about behavior, the sources heavily lean toward the debt snowball.
They do, yeah.
Paying off that little $300 medical bill gives your brain a massive hit of dopamine. It proves to you that you can actually win. You take the payment you are making on that bill, roll it into the next largest debt, and the momentum builds.
It gets faster and faster.
Well, whether you use the snowball or the avalanche, the underlying mechanism is focused intensity. You aren't just paying the minimums. You are temporarily pausing your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You cut the subscriptions, you sell the junk in your garage, you pick up weekend overtime, and you hurl every single available dollar at that debt until the spreadsheet reads 0.
But here is the harsh reality that we have to confront. You can use focused intensity to pay off $50,000 in debt, but if you do not fundamentally change the way you interact with money on a daily basis, you will be right back in a financial crisis within 2 years.
Because the habits haven't changed.
To return to your analogy, if you clean the closet but you keep carrying boxes of junk into the house every afternoon, the room will be destroyed again. That requires us to deeply examine our daily spending habits.
which transitions us perfectly into conscious spending. And before we get into the mechanics of budgeting, we have to talk about the psychological environment we are trying to budget within. We have to talk about how pop culture has completely warped our sense of reality and expectation.
We are constantly subconsciously bombarded by what financial writer Emma Edwards refers to as lifestyle benchmarks.
Think about the media we consume. Think about iconic television shows like Friends or Sex and the City. You are watching a part-time coffee shop waitress or a woman who writes one newspaper column a week, living in absolutely massive, gorgeously decorated apartments in the West Village of Manhattan.
It's completely absurd.
They are constantly eating out at restaurants, they're buying designer shoes, they're drinking $4 lattes every single morning, and there is seemingly never, ever a financial consequence. Rent is never an issue. They never have their electricity turned off.
We laugh at the absurdity of it, but our brains internalize it. We slowly begin to accept that level of constant consumption as the baseline normal for adulthood.
Exactly. We try to mimic these fictional benchmarks in our real working class lives. We think, well, I have a full-time job, I should be able to afford a nice apartment and daily takeout. And as a result, our money just passively leaks out of our accounts.
Passive leaks are the silent killer of wealth.
We don't even make conscious decisions anymore. We just tap our phones on the terminal to pay for a $7 iced coffee while scrolling through Instagram, completely disengaged from the transaction.
And when people realize they are leaking money, their first instinct is to turn to traditional budgeting.
Spreadsheets and calculators.
But traditional budgeting advice is inherently flawed because it relies entirely on restriction. A traditional budget feels exactly like a crash diet, where you are only allowed to eat celery and drink water.
That sounds miserable.
It is. You meticulously track every penny you spend after you spend it, and then you feel intensely guilty for buying a coffee. You hold on for 3 weeks, the deprivation becomes psychologically unbearable, and then you binge spend on a weekend trip and abandon the budget entirely. We need a structural system that entirely removes the guilt.
Enter the conscious spending plan. This is a proactive system. Instead of tracking the past and feeling ashamed, you aggressively direct the future the moment your paycheck hits your account. You divide your money into automated buckets.
The framework is brilliant in its simplicity. Bucket 1, fixed costs. This should consume roughly 50 to 60% of your take-home pay. This covers your survival and obligations, your rent or mortgage, your utilities, your groceries, your insurance premiums, and your minimum debt payments.
Bucket 2 is investments. 10% of your income goes here. This is you paying your future self. It's automated and out of sight.
Bucket 3 is savings goals, 5 to 10%. This is the short-term future. It's the fun for your next vacation, saving up for a down payment on a car, setting aside money for Christmas gifts, or topping off your emergency fund.
And then we get to bucket 4, which is the magic of the entire system. 20 to 35% of your income is allocated to guilt-free spending.
The fun money.
This is your lifestyle money. Eating out at restaurants, going to the movies, buying new clothes, getting drinks with friends. The beauty here is that if the money is in that specific bucket, you have permission to spend every single dime of it with absolute zero guilt.
Why? Because you already know with mathematical certainty that your rent is paid, your emergency fund is topped off, and your retirement is actively growing.
It creates incredible psychological freedom. But to ensure that you are actually spending that guilt-free money on things that bring you genuine joy, and not just squandering it on passive leaks, we have to employ a radical audit of your purchases. We have to return to Vicki Robin's concept of life energy and calculate your real hourly wage.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting. And this calculation absolutely blew my mind when I first ran the numbers on my own life.
Same here. It's wild.
We all think we know what we make. Let's say your employer pays you $15 an hour on paper. You look at a video game that costs $60, and you do the quick mental math. Okay, 60 divided by 15 is 4. I have to work 4 hours to buy this game.
But that math is entirely fictitious, because $15 is not your real wage.
Not even close. You have to account for the financial and temporal costs of actually maintaining that job.
Let's break it down. First, the financial costs. You have to subtract all the money you spend simply because you are employed. You pay for gas to commute. You pay for wear and tear on your vehicle.
You have to buy specific work clothes or uniforms that you would never wear on a Saturday.
You pay for expensive convenience food on your lunch break because you don't have time to go home. You might even spend $50 at the bar on Friday night, specifically to decompress from the crushing stress of the job.
You subtract all of those job-related expenses from your net pay.
And then, crucially, you have to add the unpaid hours that the job steals from your life. You aren't just giving them 40 hours, you are giving them the hour you spend sitting in gridlock traffic every morning.
You are giving them the 45 minutes it takes you to wake up, iron your clothes, and mentally prepare for the shift.
You are giving them the hour you spend exhausted on the couch at night, unable to play with your kids because your physical energy is completely depleted.
So when you do the actual math, when you subtract the job costs from your take-home pay and divide that smaller number by the total hours the job demands from your existence, that $15 an hour job might actually only be paying you $6 an hour of real usable life energy.
Which completely vaporizes your previous assumptions about affordability.
It changes everything. If your real wage is $6 an hour, that $60 video game doesn't cost you 4 hours of work. It costs you 10 hours of your life.
Wow.
If your rent is $1,500 a month, it is costing you 250 hours of your actual life every single month just to keep a roof over your head. That is a staggering, sobering realization.
It creates a visceral emotional reaction to your spending. It forces you to look at every single purchase through a radically different lens. Before you tap your card, you begin to ask 3 fundamental questions. First, does this purchase bring me fulfillment that is proportional to the life energy I'm about to spend?
That's a great filter.
Second, is this purchase actually aligned with my core values, or am I just buying it to impress people I don't even like? And third, how would my spending on this item change if I didn't have to work this draining job?
The ultimate goal of all of this conscious spending and life energy auditing isn't to force you to stop spending entirely. Nobody wants to live like a monk in a cave, hoarding pennies and being miserable.
Right, that's not the point.
The goal is clarity. It is to stop hemorrhaging money on things you don't actually care about, the passive leaks, so that you can spend lavishly and unapologetically on the things you truly love. It is all about intentionality.
And when you operate with that level of intentionality, a natural mathematical byproduct is created. You naturally begin to spend less than you earn. You create a gap between your income and your expenses. That gap is your monthly surplus.
That surplus is everything.
And once you've built your foundation and you have eliminated your high-interest debt and you have this steady surplus every month, it is finally time to put that surplus to work.
Which brings us to the engine of long-term freedom, building wealth, investing, and retirement.
Now, the financial industry has done a magnificent job of making investing seem like a high-stakes casino. They portray it as an arena where you have to be glued to 6 monitors, watching a ticker tape all day, reading obscure financial reports, and aggressively trading stocks to win.
It's just not true.
We need to completely demystify this. You do not need a finance degree to build generational wealth. In fact, the most successful investing strategy for the working class is incredibly, wonderfully boring.
Boring is highly profitable. Let's look at the biggest myth versus fact in the investing world. Myth. To build wealth, you need to identify the next big tech startup, time the market perfectly, or hire a very expensive, prestigious financial advisor to actively manage your money.
And the fact.
The overwhelming majority of professional Wall Street fund managers, people who do this 80 hours a week and have billions of dollars in research at their disposal, fail to beat the average return of the stock market over a 10 or 20-year period.
And worse, those active managers charge you massive fees just for the privilege of underperforming.
Exactly. These are called expense ratios. Let's say a mutual fund charges a 2% expense ratio. That sounds tiny, right? There's 2 pennies on the dollar.
Seems harmless.
But because of the math of compounding, that 2% fee is taken out every single year, regardless of whether the fund goes up or down. Over a 30-year investing timeline, a 2% fee will literally confiscate nearly 50% of your potential wealth.
Wait, 50%, half.
Nearly half, yes.
Yeah.
You are taking all the risk, providing all the capital, and Wall Street is siphoning off half of your life energy.
So if the experts can't beat the market and their fees destroy your wealth, what is the alternative? This is where we look at the legendary John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, and his concept of the humble arithmetic of index funds. It is beautifully simple.
It really is.
Instead of trying to guess whether Apple or Google or some new AI startup is going to be the ultimate winner 10 years from now, you simply buy a low-cost index fund like an S&P 500 fund.
An index fund is just a basket. When you buy one share of an S&P 500 index fund, you are buying a tiny microscopic piece of all 500 of the largest, most profitable companies in America simultaneously.
You own a piece of the grocery stores, the tech giants, the healthcare companies, and the banks.
It completely removes the need for expertise or clairvoyance. You don't have to look for the needle in the haystack, you just buy the entire haystack. If the overall American economy grows, your wealth grows. And the expense ratios on these funds are often as low as 0.04%, practically free.
And once you select that broad, boring index fund, the crucial action step is automation. You utilize a strategy called dollar cost averaging.
Which sounds complicated, but it isn't.
Let's break that down. Dollar cost averaging just means you pick a set amount of money, let's say $200, and you set it to automatically transfer from your checking account into your index fund on the 15th of every single month.
Set it and forget it.
You do this completely automatically, and you do not pay any attention to the news cycle. If the news is screaming that the market is hitting record highs, your $200 buys fewer shares. If the news is screaming that the market is crashing and the sky is falling, your $200 buys more shares on sale.
You never, ever try to guess the timing.
Because trying to time the market, pulling your money out when you get scared, and putting it back in when you feel safe is a guaranteed way to destroy your returns.
You will almost inevitably sell low out of fear and buy high out of greed. Automation removes your emotional factory settings from the equation.
Now, I know when we start talking about investing, the anxiety around retirement flares up. So many working class people look at their current balances and feel an immense sense of shame.
It's very common.
They feel like they are hopelessly behind, that they should have started 20 years ago, and that they will never catch up.
We need to inject some profound historical context here to relieve that guilt. The entire concept of retirement, the idea that you stop working in your 60s and then spend the final 30 years of your life playing golf and traveling, entirely supported by your investments.
Yeah.
That is a brand new invention in the timeline of human history.
Seriously. The 401k, which is the primary vehicle Americans use to save for retirement today, was only invented in 1978. It is not even 50 years old.
Right. Prior to World War II, the expectation for the working class was incredibly blunt. You worked until your body physically gave out, and then you moved in with your children or you died.
The modern concept of decades of funded leisure is a massive historical anomaly. We are all essentially beginners at this. Our parents did not have this perfectly figured out, and their parents certainly did not.
So if you feel like you are learning a foreign language, give yourself some grace. You are attempting to master a financial life cycle that is entirely new to human society.
That context is so liberating. But I also know the practical fear people have right now. They are looking at inflation, they are hearing rumors of recessions on social media, and they are terrified. They think, okay, I'll automate my investments, but what if the market crashes the very next day and I lose half my hard-earned money?
It's a valid fear, but we have to connect this to the bigger macroeconomic picture. You have to understand that the economy breathes. It inhales and exhales. It moves in cyclical patterns of expansion and contraction.
There are ups and downs.
Yes, the market will crash. It is an absolute guarantee that you will experience multiple severe bear markets in your lifetime. But if you zoom out from a 1-year chart to a 30-year chart, the trajectory of human innovation, productivity, and economic growth is persistently upward.
Right. Every crisis feels like the end of the world when you were in it. The dot-com bust, the 2008 financial crisis, global pandemics. But the market ultimately recovers and pushes higher.
Exactly. Fear of a temporary crash is no excuse to keep all your money hidden under a mattress or rotting in a checking account. In fact, keeping all your money in cash guarantees that you will lose wealth.
Because of inflation.
While the stock market has volatility, inflation is a silent mathematical certainty. If you hold cash for 20 years, inflation will slowly and quietly eat away half of its purchasing power. Investing in productive assets is the only way to outpace the decay of inflation.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of territory today. We started with psychology of our factory settings, we built the emergency fund foundation, we attacked the debt, we audited our life energy to spend consciously, and we broke down the boring automated math of index fund investing. But as all of our sources make incredibly clear, these are not isolated chapters in a test book.
No, they form a living, breathing ecosystem.
This is where we bring it all together. Let's map out exactly how a working class adult builds an unbreakable financial life by weaving all of these distinct threads into an interconnected web.
It is entirely sequential. Let's trace the logic. You start by building your starter emergency fund. That cash shield protects you from having to take on new debt when the inevitable car repair or medical bill arrives.
Because you are no longer bleeding new debt, you can focus all your surplus energy on eliminating your existing debt. And when that debt is finally destroyed, a massive portion of your monthly income is suddenly freed up.
That freed up income, which used to go to the credit card company, now allows you to fully fund your long-term savings and your boring automated investments.
Meanwhile, your cheap term life and high-deductible insurance are acting as the perimeter fence, ensuring that a tragic accident or illness doesn't force you to liquidate those investments prematurely.
And retirement. Retirement isn't some magical age determined by the government. Retirement is simply the ultimate mathematical destination of those automated index fund investments compounding over decades.
It all leads to the ultimate objective, a concept that Vicki Robin calls the crossover point. This is the holy grail of personal finance.
Yes. The crossover point is the exact mathematical moment in time when the monthly income generated by your investments through dividends and compound growth surpasses your monthly living expenses.
It is the threshold where work transitions from being a strict requirement for survival to being an entirely optional pursuit. And the beautiful truth is that you do not need to be a Silicon Valley billionaire or a Wall Street hedge fund manager to reach it.
Not at all. By keeping your fixed costs low, by ruthlessly auditing and valuing your life energy, by staying entirely out of the trap of consumer debt, and by consistently automating money into boring index funds, ordinary working-class people can absolutely hit the crossover point.
It is an engineered machine. I like to think of the entire system as a car engine. Your income, your paycheck, is the fuel. Debt is a massive, gaping leak in your gas tank, spilling fuel all over the highway. Budgeting and conscious spending are how you patch the leak. Your emergency fund is the spare tire in the trunk, ensuring that a sudden blowout doesn't permanently end your road trip. And investing in index funds is putting the car on cruise control, allowing the momentum to carry you toward your ultimate destination.
It is a beautifully designed machine, and once you build it, you, the driver, are completely in control.
So we have talked a lot of theory, but what does this actually mean for you, the listener, right now, today? We promised a practical guide, so we are going to leave you with 3 specific actionable steps that you can take this week to begin building your engine.
Step 1.
Number 1, calculate your real hourly wage. Do the life energy audit. Get out a piece of paper. Take your take-home pay and subtract the hidden costs of your job, the commute, the clothes, the money you spend de-stressing. Then divide that by the total hours your job actually consumes from your week, including the commute and the exhaustion. Figure out what an hour of your life energy is actually worth. The very next time you go to tap your card for a random purchase, ask yourself exactly how many hours of your finite life it is going to cost you, and ask yourself if the trade is truly worth it.
Number 2, call just one credit card company. Turn over the card in your wallet with the highest balance, dial the 1-800 number on the back, and use the script. Tell them you have been a loyal customer, tell them you're getting better offers in the mail, and politely ask them to lower your APR. You have 50-50 shot, it takes exactly 5 minutes of your time, and it has the potential to save you hundreds of dollars in interest this year alone.
And number 3, start building your $1,000 starter emergency fund this weekend. Look around your house for things you haven't used in a year and sell them online. Cancel a couple of streaming subscriptions that you forgot you were even paying for. Pick up an extra shift. Take whatever cash you can scrape together and put it into a completely separate, high-yield savings account at a different bank so it is physically and psychologically difficult to access. Build your Murphy's Law repellent.
Because once that foundation of cash is in place, the constant low-level panic in your brain begins to subside. You can finally take a deep breath and start making rational long-term decisions. Which leaves us with a final reflection to consider. Pull up your most recent bank statement on your phone. What if that statement isn't just a cold list of transactions, dates, and numbers? What if it is an exact, unforgiving moral mirror of your priorities? If a complete stranger were to look at exactly where every dollar of your money went last month, what would they conclude that you value most in this world?
Would they see a ledger that reflects someone who deeply values freedom, family, security, and peace of mind? Or would they see a ledger of someone who values convenience, fast food, making interest payments to banks, and keeping up appearances for people they don't even like?
And the most important question of all, does the reflection in that mirror match the life you actually want to be living?
That is the question you have to answer for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's time to step off the treadmill, cut through the noise, and take back control of your life energy. Until next time.